I graduated KGI in 2010, so it was on the other side of this table, and hopefully can provide a little bit of insight from that perspective, as well as Nancy. So yeah, out of KGI, I actually joined a rotational program. And it was an operations rotational program at Baxter. And I think that was kind of, helps you decide what you want to do with your life or with your career. And then from there, I worked for a CMO called Better Pharma, and still kind of staying in operations, mostly doing like final drug product packaging or filling. And then from there, I got into cell therapy world with Kite, and from Kite, I joined Arsenal. So moved around a little bit over the course of my career, and probably still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But I found my way to kind of supply chain and project management. So happy to answer questions as it comes to that.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Great. Hi everyone, my name is Matti. I'm a single-use technology expert at Sartorius. My background started as a biologist, and then I discovered KGI. I'm actually the first MN graduating class of 2018.
So you got that question.
Yeah, I definitely knew. Yeah, hopefully, right? So throughout KGI and even a little bit before and a little bit after, I had done a series of internships, TMP projects, master's projects, so all those key buzzwords that all of you guys talk about. I know them. And then as soon as I graduated, I took on a role with Sartorius, and I've been with them for the last 7 years, so never thought I was going to stick it out to one company, but I'm very happy that I have done so. And I've been in there in various different roles throughout my time. So I can also talk about career progression with one company. You want to listen to that? Okay.
So my name is Beth Junker. I was not affiliated with KGI in my education, but I worked at a Merck company, the U.S. Merck, I like to say, for about 27 years. I did a lot of things in that time period, just to call out a few. I ran a very large pilot facility that did all kinds of upstream processing and later downstream processing for a number of years. Did a lot of process development, growing all kinds of things from the mammalian cells that are popular now to yeast and bacteria to fungal, disgusting-looking fungal cells, and even worms. That was one of our more interesting cultivations. I also worked on strategic things like quality by design and knowledge management, and also in some of the early late phase licensure filings for Merck in most notably Keytruda in the therapeutic protein and antibody space. I left Merck in the fall of 2016 to become an independent consultant, and now I do a lot of things, namely most frequently helping small companies get their initial drug into the clinic.
Great, thank you and welcome. And so quickly before we get into our questions, we just want to ask the audience to hold your questions to the end. We'll have a Q&A session. Okay, so for the first question for the panelists, can you briefly share your story of how you landed your first role in the biopharma industry?
I'll start, but then next time one of y'all asks. So at KGI, there was actually a lot of folks that had done this rotational program at Baxter, and there were also other rotational programs at Amgen, Genentech, and so I think I kind of knew that I wanted to do that, but I would like to say that it was probably the KGI network that sort of, let's say at least kind of greased the wheel of getting the job, because KGI students before myself had gone and done a good job and created a good brand for us. So I think that was part of the reason that I got an interview. And then there's probably a guy sitting in the audience here who might have gotten me an interview. So I think there's also another really important thing about making sure that your network is really strong, and not only professors and other students, but just take advantage of everybody here in this room, and ultimately we all want to help. At the end of the day, you still have to do a really good job in the interview, so also take advantage of that, mock interviews and things like that.
I would agree with that. I think I had done a lot of different types of projects and internships, and at the end of each of those, the answer was, this is something that I want to continue, yes or no? And the answer was always no, so I was really afraid that I wasn't going to find something that I was passionate about. So I was very vocal with my advisors and with really anyone that would listen to me about, what it is that I liked and disliked. And it was actually an advisor that had connected me with a previous alum that was interested in hiring people, and so I got that interview through that connection. And similar experiences, yeah, just even if you don't know what you want, just be vocal, I think helps.
So in my case, it was a bit different. I had defended my PhD in September and got married very soon after. I don't recommend that combination. But it was, I had a couple interviews and just nothing was really floating my boat as to, a job, something I like to do. So I went to the AICHE meeting, I think everybody's probably familiar with that, in November. And the person who became my boss was giving a talk. And I said, this is it, I would like to do this. And I basically went up and gave him a card or my information and said, could I apply for a job in your organization? So I came down for the interview, very, very excited, except for the day of the interview, I end up with one of those really messy colds, that chemistry will only take you so far, and then you're just kind of like, that's it. And so I was convinced the whole day, like, there's no way I'm getting this job, because, but I did get the job and stayed for 27 years.
Thank you very much. So continuing with the panel, we have the following questions. How can students and early professionals effectively network within the biopharma industry to find these opportunities?
I can take that. I am a strong believer of going to networking events, whether it's through your career services pathways or any of the industry talks that KGI holds. But I also advise to participate and become a student member of your local PDA or ISBE chapter, and just simply attending those meetings on a regular basis. I'm knock on wood lucky enough to say that I think every career move or opportunity has always been through a connection that I've met in some aspect in the industry. So really do take the time to participate in those, they're really important. That's my feedback.
And you want to go this way now?
Let's do it. Yeah.
So I think there's so many interesting ways to network, and I don't want to discount the digital ones. So, LinkedIn and other networks like that I think are very good. If there's people that you happen to know that are in the industry already, certainly an event like this that has a lot of time for talking is a great opportunity to network. But don't forget each other too. One of the fondest memories I have of graduate school, and even undergrad, was asking people, so what are you going to do? What are you looking at? What did you not like that I might like, right? That kind of thing. Don't forget each other.
Yeah, that's great. Not a ton to add other than specific strategies when you are networking is, I like tapping into your network around and paying it forward. So maybe you develop a really deep connection with your mentor or somebody, but there's not a great job fit right there, but you've got a friend that you can help out with that. And so I think it's kind of building those deep connections and then paying it forward, because ultimately it will come back. I agree with Nancy. Every job that I've gotten has been through my network, right? It wasn't a blind resume that just kind of went out into the ether and then I got a job back. It was, I knew somebody at that company or somebody had asked me about it or something.
Great, thank you. And our next question is, what differentiates a standout candidate in applications and interviews specifically for entry-level positions in this field?
So I would say the interview part, in my opinion, your questions may differentiate you as a candidate. It's always good to understand what you did, but it's what you're asking about, what you're curious about, that tells people what you're thinking.
Yeah, I love that response, because what that shows is that enthusiasm, and that's something that, especially in an entry-level position, you can't teach enthusiasm, you can't teach things like that. So it's that go-getting, doing the research to ask intelligent questions, but being just generally excited. I really like that. So come with enthusiasm and do the research to ask those good questions.
I would agree, enthusiasm and then also tenacity. I think when I interview, one of the key things I look for is, do they know what they're applying for? Have they done their research? Even a simple skim of the website for the company that you're applying for, I can easily tell right off the question of, why Sartorius, if they even bother to look at our website. So that is, you should really be able to answer why this company. I think that's really important and underrated.
Thank you very much. The next question we have is, what are the most valuable skills early career professionals should focus on developing in their first few years?
This is my bias, right? So take for it what you will, but early on I did a rotation in project management. And for me, I feel like that's a skill that is just kind of broadly applicable no matter where you go, in terms of how to facilitate a meeting, how to track due dates and hold people accountable for things. Because ultimately, I don't think any of you are going to have any trouble with the technical piece, right? So really, some of those skills around like how does business work, and from a project management perspective, I think has been very helpful for me. And when somebody needed something like, oh, Thomas can run a meeting, we'll have him do it. Took a lot of minutes, so I probably didn't want to have to be the minute taker, but ultimately you get good access to things from that.
I would say focus on soft skills. A simple thing like being able to chit-chat for a few minutes, whether it's about the weather or maybe a recent meeting or anything like that. That during my time at KGI, that was something that I worked really hard on. So I joined a lot of the Toastmasters type of events so that I could practice my public speaking, practice having conversations, and really honing those personable skills that can be displayed in an interview.
So I would say listening is probably the most important skill. Talking is good, right? But when you're talking, you can't listen. So just you need a good balance of a good amount of listening.
Okay, thank you. And our next question is, how can someone in their early career identify which path in biopharma is the best fit for them? For example, R&D, manufacturing, PD, regulatory.
I can start. I also did a rotational type internship for about 3 months in a medical device company before I started KGI. And while not every single thing translated to the bioprocessing world, I did get a sense very early on that I knew I would not like R&D. So that was a really good indicator on which direction to go with my life. So like Thomas said, if you can find some sort of rotational internship or rotational co-op that's 1 to 2 years that you can kind of, if you're really unsure, you can dig in a little bit deeper to see if this is something that's interest.
I would say, most people get hired for one job, so it's a little bit hard sometimes to say in your first 2 years you're going to be rotating. Some companies have these programs, but they also need the people in the hands-on now. So I would say go for a job that you think is pretty interesting, or a company, but go for a company that there's the opportunity to move into different roles or explore different roles if you can. And then look for people in different roles and just find out what they're doing and talk to them. I think that could be a great way to explore and see what your next job might be.
Yeah, great. Probably 2 things. One is it's just as important to know what you don't want to do. So I think Nancy, you mentioned that, where if you can figure out what you don't want to do, that already narrows the field down. And then 2, kind of when you're thinking about that role, I really like the idea of selecting maybe on company size and just big versus small. One's not necessarily better than the other. I started in a big company, and I love the fact that I learned systems, right? Baxter has a lot of really good systems on, how does an employee fit into the broader scheme. But then you can be in a small company, and kind of like Beth said, you can work on just about anything, right? Because if there's a need and you're, a free set of hands, you can come over and work on that. So those are just some things to think about when you're in that early stage of your career.
Thank you very much. Continuing, what's one thing that you learned on your first job or early in your career that education didn't prepare you?
Is it up to me first?
Yeah, you're up.
I have an answer.
Let's you go.
So through all the projects I did at KGI, I knew how to take a molecule and how to, theoretically, right, obviously, and pretty much get it to the end stage. And then I joined Sartorius, which is an equipment supplier, and I had no idea how my equipment fit into this theoretical aspect. So for me, there was a huge disconnect on, okay, you know how to bring a drug process through all of the steps of unit operations, but okay, to actually physically do it with equipment, I had no idea. So that was a huge learning curve for me, but I'm here. I'm learning every day.
I would say maybe I could talk about two things. The first, I think, is flexibility, like how you plan something or how you think something should go. You may need to take other input and alter it as things change. The other thing is to be conscious of how technology can be can give a film or a view of you. This is an old story which only maybe those with gray hair in the room will appreciate, but a long time ago when you got your computer, it was a very old system, and there wasn't like really an IT department, so someone in the group had to set up your very old computer, which would never leave your office. And the person made a mistake on my computer, and basically when I wrote an email, every single typo when I went back and corrected something would come to the person who saw it. So I saw it as right on my screen, but the corrections would go out. So I get this feedback like, your spelling is horrible. And I'm like, oh my God, like what do you mean by that? And then I saw what he was talking about. And that was something that I didn't realize was painting a picture of me to everybody I sent an email to, right? Just because of technology. Just be aware of that.
Yeah. Perception is reality. That is very true. So if you're doing a lot of really good work, but you're not, people don't see that. Like for me, probably a little too long in California, people don't think I have a sense of urgency. They just think that I'm too laid back. So that's something that I learned early on, was that the way people perceive you may not be exactly what you think. So always seek that feedback. People are very willing to give feedback as long as you're willing to take it, but just make sure that your sense of self is accurate, because that'll be very important.
Thank you very much. Now we open for questions from the audience.
So this is more like transitioning jobs kind of thing. Just out of curiosity, when you decided to change jobs, or you almost decided to change jobs, what was the
money? But at the end of the day, when they quote you a number that's 50% more than you were making, it was pretty easy to say yes. And we're not talking a ton of money here, because I wasn't making a lot to start, but it was enough at that age that it was pretty cool. The second one was personal, actually in geography, needing to get back to LA. And then the third one, it was about the opportunity and going to work for a small company. So I would say lots of different ones. There's the just pure financial piece, there's a geography piece, and then the most recent career move to Arsenal was probably more about like opportunity, growth, excitement to work for a startup.
For me, it was always seeking a team that made me feel good. So if our company reorged, or I was slotted for a team that I knew I wasn't going to be happy with, or a manager that I wasn't going to really get along with, that was always a motivation to maybe take the next step into a new pathway. Not to say that that's a common thing, or that you'll meet that all the time, but for me, I really prioritized my happiness within my own team, because then that translated to a better work-life balance overall for me.
And I would say for me, it's really, especially in a big company, you usually, get a group if you're doing well, and you develop those people, and some of them leave to find other opportunities, but some of them could do your job, and you need to move on so that they can have their career development. So it's just sort of to keep the flow going, I guess, would be a motivation.
Jordan?
What is one character trait that you have intentionally cultivated that has helped you in your
open-minded, I would say. I'm not always right. I don't always know what I'm talking about. I'm not the smartest person in the room type mentality. And to really be open-minded, especially when ideas are put on the table that I may not necessarily agree with, but could see potential with. That was my trait.
So my trait had to do with just standing up and talking to people, because most of the time I would be like this. And it was not only uncomfortable, but I would always get very nervous whenever I was talking and 4 people were listening to me. All of a sudden I would have trouble thinking of what I was going to say. So really, just being able to converse off the cuff, so to speak, on technical subjects is something I had to work on.
I'm going to go back to something Beth said earlier, that skill of listening, I think is just very, very critical. Because if you listen and then ask people questions, people love to talk about themselves. So the more you get people talking about themselves, they're going to leave and think, man, Thomas was really nice. All they just talk about themselves all the time. So I think listening, but really kind of tuning in on that and asking meaningful questions to people, it'll go a long way.
Leo?
What are ways that you could help develop a relationship with your manager or supervisor or the person that you're reporting to?
I would kind of go off of what Thomas just said of building that personal interaction. So I would hope that you would have regular one-on-one meetings scheduled with your manager. But maybe taking the first 5 or so minutes to really ask, how's your weekend? How are your kids? What's going on in your life? Because at the end of the day, they're people too. And the more you get them to talk about themselves, the more you pick up on, oh, someone's birthday's coming up, their child's birthday party's this weekend. How was it? You guys have fun? Did you do anything special? And that then kind of slowly but surely builds a level of trust and openness. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I'll
go. So I love the idea of making it a little personal too, because you're going to spend a lot of time with your manager, right? Or maybe not, but chances are you're going to spend a lot of time with your manager. So getting to know them as a person is critical. Probably goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, is do good work, right? I think that's probably step number 1 is deliver. And if you say you're going to do it, do it. Like, that's probably the easiest way to develop a good relationship, is to be known as a consistent person who's going to deliver. And then probably the other piece is be proactive. And if don't wait for your boss to tell you to do something. You can seek things out, seek out new opportunities, and really take advantage of those. Because there's tons of work to do, but a lot of times a manager, they know what's in front of them and they're going to tell you what to do, but it's almost up to you to go find out some of those other problems and solve them early, and that'll really resonate and have a lot of impact.
So I'll give another 2. So the first is bring problems, but also solutions. So don't just dump things in your manager's lap that they need to solve. Nobody likes that. It's creating more work. The second one, which Leonard already heard, is really figure out how your manager likes to communicate. Not everybody likes to sit and talk. Some people are much better doing email, or they like text. Or I had one person who I had to be sure to say good morning before I asked them a question, because that ticked them off if they weren't greeted appropriately. So everybody kind of has their ways.
So I was going to ask, kind of piggybacking off the last question. So say you're in a new position, and there's a big learning curve, and say, like you said, like your managers and someone your communication style is great with. How do you reach out to someone else to kind of like get over that learning curve? Do you think? What's the best way to do that?
I didn't quite hear the whole question. Was it about someone's communication style? I know you can speak
Can you
loudly.
repeat the question, please,
A
Mara?
little bit louder.
Did you hear?
I heard Dylan.
Okay.
Sorry, Mara.
So I'll try to project, but
Yeah,
I
much
won't be
better.
that loud. So I was gonna say, say like some of us are gonna be going into a new position we're not always comfortable with, right? And if you're with a manager who your communication style is not always great with, like, how do you think is the best way to get over that learning style, like learning curve, with not necessarily your manager per se? Yeah, with someone else. How do you go about do something like that?
Simply asking. I understand where you're coming from, right? Like you have a disconnect with your manager.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you have already brought up the issue at hand already.
Yeah.
Maybe it hasn't been resolved, and now you're seeking support from someone else, correct? Did I understand that right? Okay.
Yeah. How do you not burn that bridge with your manager? Also
Sure.
reach out?
I mean, the first part, I think, and you know, you can step in at any time, you know, reaching out to that secondary person simply by saying, you know, this is an area that I'm not really comfortable with. I identify you as an expert. Can you help support? I don't need to take up too much of your time, but maybe could we schedule some coffee chat or anything like that? And see where that conversation goes and just see how much time they're willing to help support. And then, similar to what Beth said, is then I've taken that information and then going back to your manager and saying, you know, I've worked with so-and-so to maybe progress a little bit. This is their recommendation. This is what I'd like to do to implement towards this project or whatever you're doing. Do you agree or disagree? Can we have a conversation? I think that's how I would approach it personally, but I don't know if you have anything to add.
I think it's a hard situation because remember, your manager isn't being difficult on purpose, right? No one, even people we think are difficult, they're not trying to be difficult, they're just succeeding, right? So I think you have to be careful that feelings don't get hurt, right? And that's what all this comes down to. It can never hurt to say, look, I'm trying to walk you through this because I think at the end it's going to lead to a better solution. Do you have 10 minutes, like asking for what you want? Do you have 10 minutes to just, you know, listen and think about this? And don't necessarily try to close the deal too fast. Give them time to think about it. I think that could be really helpful. Ultimately, you have to work with this person, and probably if it's coming up with one thing, it'll come up with several other things. So I think that's the most practical way.
If you have a formal mentor in the company, that might help because you're not intentionally on this particular circumstance going to someone else. You have a regular relationship with a mentor. And
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah, I echo that, where build a network, especially if you take a role where there might be other KGI people there or folks like that, where you can go to a trusted person to kind of help you navigate. And then the other thing I'd say is that I think it was the Dalai Lama, where it's like even difficult people is a learning experience and it's an opportunity for you to grow. So kind of also embrace it a little bit and just say, I'm going to learn something. And the next manager, you know, when I'm in the interview, I'm going to ask some specific questions to know that I don't get a manager like this again.
So we're going to reel it in with one last question. So the majority of our students are either looking for summer internships or jobs, and we just wanted to ask if you could give them one piece of advice for their search, what would it be?
I would recommend to be really targeted. It's not worth your time or effort to send 50 to 100 generic resumes to a bunch of generic companies that you don't even know if you like. You know, take some time to be a little bit introspective about maybe what you think you would want to do. Find the maybe top 5 companies that you think would make you happy and would fit that description, and then target your resumes to those specific job descriptions. And I think that's, be a little bit more intentional, and, you know, quality over quantity.
So kind of staying on that same idea and the network idea, a lot of big companies have like, you know, higher bonuses that people get if they refer somebody. So tap into your network, and if you know you want to go work for Genentech, find somebody in Genentech who can benefit from your getting hired because they get this, you know, $5,000 bonus. And then you've got an advocate for you on the inside. Generally that's, you know, bigger companies, but you know, once I got a referral bonus once at Baxter, and you know, it was pretty cool, right? So it's definitely don't feel bad to reach out to people because, you know, there might be something in it for them. Is basically what I'm getting at.
So I guess maybe my comments probably mostly apply to summer internships, but it could apply to your first job. Don't be too narrow in like that you have to do exactly something that you're thinking of at the moment. try to look at it from a broad point of view. I mean, can tell people about my summer internships that has nothing to do with biotechnology. Yet I still learned a lot, and I was glad I did them. So you can still, just because you don't have an internship exactly in the precise section of biotech that you want to be in, doesn't mean that field is close to you.
Great, thank you guys so much. And before we welcome the next set of panelists, let's just give them a round of applause.
I'm the general manager at a Catalent facility in Madison, Wisconsin. The facility there focuses on the development and manufacturing of protein therapeutics. I will say most of my career has been in protein therapeutics, so this will be a very interesting topic about outside of traditional bioprocessing, but I've had a lot of colleagues that have gone out. But yeah, happy to be here today.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tom Ransohoff. I am the principal of my own consulting firm called RTI Consulting LLC. I started my career in the Bay Area after getting a chemical engineering degree. Worked for the first half of my career in industry in some type of CMC-related role, mostly for small and mid-sized biotech companies. And then about halfway through my career, I joined a former boss to help build and run a CMC consulting group called Bioprocess Technology Consultants. Thought I'd do that for 2 years, but it wound up being a 20-year journey and a lot of fun. And then most recently, started up a company in the continuous manufacturing space that got acquired by a large CDMO called Resilience, and worked there heading up their biologics business unit for a couple of years before coming back to independent consulting. So it's been quite a journey, a lot of very different experiences. Unlike some of the previous panelists, I've worked in less stable, secure companies, but it's given me a good broad perspective of the industry.
Matt Croughan, I was the original bioprocessing faculty member at KGI. Got recruited by Dennis Fenton to come start the program, and started my career at Genentech back when titers were 0.05 grams per liter, 50 mg per liter, and have been part of that industry ever since. A lot of you are my friends. I recruited the original ABCAB. It was basically my friends, and it's just expanded from there. And had the opportunity to work on a lot of very exciting stuff. You get a reputation of doing well when a technology is sort of struggling and needs to reach a commercial plateau. And so I literally got hired every time that comes up. So I worked for all the original cellular ag companies. I worked for the big advanced biofuels companies, the original successful gene therapy company, Avexis, and now I get to work at PBS and cell therapy. So I know a lot about success and failure. I've had to lay off 95 people sometimes. Other times you get to hire a bunch of people. So you never know how that's going to go. But it's exciting, and I can talk to you guys about that, career opportunities, about lots of different opportunities there. And then the other things, I've had my own consulting business for a long time now, 28 years or something like that, with over 100 clients, and worked on a lot of different projects, and can talk about that too, if you like.
Thank you. So you kind of talked about this already, and a lot of our panel today is going to be about emerging topics and emergency trends. But let's go back a little bit. So when you first began working in the industry, what trends or innovations excited you the most?
I'll start. So yeah, exactly. I'll be maybe one of the most dated. So two of the really interesting things that I worked on very early in my career were brand new technologies. One was a technology related to purification of antibodies called Protein A. And at that time, Protein A was a radical new approach to antibody purification. Think about it, you're going to take a protein off of the surface coat of a pathogenic bacteria. You're going to put it onto a chromatography media, use it to purify antibody. Why would anybody do that? But it obviously wound up being the mainstay of our platform antibody processes. But that's just an example of how things that seem like revolutionary technologies can gain broad adoption and become today's accepted technologies. Another one I'll mention is I started my career in formulation development and actually was helping a company in the Bay Area called Zoma keep proteins from falling out of solution when they got shipped to the clinic. And we realized it was surface-related denaturation. So I developed one of the first polysorbate-containing formulations. So now we all use polysorbate 80 or tween or some type of non-ionic surfactant in formulations. But at one time, back before the dawn of time, that was a new technology as well.
You don't get royalties every time it gets used.
No.
Yeah.
That would be
Just
great.
out there.
Yes.
I think one thing, as I was entering the workforce, there was a big focus on moving to single-use technologies. So many stainless steel facilities out there, but with cell line development technologies advancing and increasing titers, folks can move to smaller and smaller footprints. So it was a little bit of moving from this 20,000 liter stainless steel. Now we only need a 2,000 liter bioreactor. All that can be single use. So I know one of my first jobs out of graduate school, we were playing around in the lab and we thought it would be cool to develop a start to finish process using nothing but single use technologies. Everyone thought we were crazy. They didn't even really want to publish the paper when we submitted it for publication. And now that's how most manufacturing facilities run. So in just a few short years, that's how quickly things can change, or 20.
Yeah.
So when Bob Swanson formed Genentech in 1976, it went public in 1980, and it hit the news. It was an amazing event. So Swanson was way more well-known than anybody at Apple, than anybody at Microsoft. I mean, he was a legend in the United States. He's since, been surpassed somewhat fame-wise by those people, but I decided I wanted to work at Genentech, and I applied with my bachelor's in chemical engineering, and you couldn't get in that way. And everybody said, go to MIT for grad school, get a PhD, and that'll be your union card to get in, and so that's what I did. Came back, got hired by Genentech, got to be great friends with Bob Swanson. It was just an amazing company to get to work for. One of the, really recruited a lot of really brilliant people, and you got to be part of that team. And it's not, I think it's faded a bit in its fame and who it recruits, but in that era it was pretty amazing. And they hired me as their first cell culture scale-up expert. They'd run 10,000 liter fermenters, but they didn't run as well as they liked. And that'll be a big part of my talk tomorrow, is I'll tell you what happened then after I got hired and how that evolved and how that plays out now in my career currently. So, but I did basically get my dream job right out of grad school. And I liked it so much, my career mistake, if you want to say I had a mistake, was I've always stuck in that technical area. I still work in bioreactor fluid dynamics, which has probably cost me $1 million or more in lost income. But I just love it. So at some point you're going to face career options and which way do you go, right?
Great, thank you. It's funny how things can change in many years, or let's say 20 in your case. But now looking forward, have you seen any trends or seeds that companies have planted that they are expecting to come to fruition in the coming years?
You want me to start? Well, now I'm in the cell therapy space, which I'll explain to you tomorrow is probably the most difficult bioprocessing challenge ever, allogeneic cell therapy. That or cellular ag, that was my other career option. Which challenging one did you want to go? And And companies are, so Vertex is the leader in allogeneic cell therapy. They have the product that's the farthest along. They're pounding money into it. We'll see if they make it. We all hope they will. There's been a lot of companies that have trailed off, but other companies are seeding into it. So Genentech has a program. Amgen, I think, might investigating that. And so they are seeding that to see how it works out. And just to put a little perspective on this, and you know, Beth's ex-Merck, and their biggest selling drug is Keytruda. And I know firsthand from Bob Swanson that Merck told him, this will never be successful. You will never be able to have, you know, recombinant proteins and monoclonal antibodies as successful drug products that you have to inject or deliver without them being a pill. And now that's Merck's #1 product, and Humira's AbbVie's #1 product. So obviously they were wrong, whoever was at Merck at the time. But yeah, Beth's boss at Merck were believers in recombinant proteins. Her old boss, Barry Buckland, you know, really promoted it. So it wasn't a universal Merck thing to be against it. But they ultimately, it took advocates like that. You know, I will actually specifically mention Barry. And that's probably who recruited you, right, Beth? Was always a believer, and he seeded it by hiring people like Beth. And maybe they had to work on other products, you know, worms or antibiotics, but eventually some of them got to work on recombinant proteins. And then years later, might have been 15 years later, Merck had their products. So it does take advocates at the company to kind of keep it going without a lot of necessarily upper management support. So.
I might have a bit of a different take on this. You know, some things that I see, because I've moved out of, you know, the development space and more into an operational space, is especially at maybe not startup companies, but and I work in contract manufacturing, but you know, working to highly digitize and highly automate a lot of our processes so that we remove the human error element. I think this is really going to take off where we move to what they call lights out manufacturing and Biofarm 4.0 type initiatives. So seeing a lot of that really take hold, especially in the contract manufacturing area. Maybe also at large pharma, but I'm not, I would assume, but I haven't been exposed to that. But I think that that's really at the beginnings, or in its infancy, and looking to progress quite quickly.
Yeah, I would actually second that. You know, I think AI is going to be transformational, but it's going to take time, right? It's next year when we come back. It's not like the world is going to have flipped. This is going to be a 15 to 20 year journey, as Matt said. Things, yeah, that's true, right? Yeah, things take time. Adoption is slow in our industry, and you know, the point Emily just made, I think, is a good one. That you know, we are really on the cusp of taking advantage of digital technologies to transform the way we develop and manufacture products, but we're way behind most other industries in that perspective. I've been in a lot of manufacturing facilities, and I'd say up till about 5 or 6 years ago, 98% of the facilities I was in used paper batch records, and now we're finally making the leap to full digitization. I think that the field of genetic medicine is going to also be a mega trend. So I think it's just starting now with the type of cell therapy products that Matt's working on, gene therapy, viral vectors, mRNA, CRISPR-Cas. Those are all going to be very important, but it's going to take quite a bit of time for that to develop. So if that's an area you want to get into, recognize that it's a long journey. I think there's enormous opportunity in the molecular medicine monoclonal antibody field still. We tend to view that as quite mature, but really it is just starting to break into the broader patient population disease areas where we can now finally make product at a large enough scale and meet the economic targets to treat things like cardiovascular disease, neurology indications like Alzheimer's, infectious disease. So you're really just starting to see antibodies and recombinant proteins move into those areas. I think there's an enormous amount of opportunity still in those areas. And the analogy I draw there is like the car industry, you know. If you go back 20 years, you'd say the car industry was very mature. You know, we've come from the Model T to the Studebaker to now you know, Toyota Corolla that, you know, can drive for 300,000 miles without breaking down. But look how far we've come since then, and I think antibodies still have a long way to go. So I wouldn't rule those out either in your thinking.
And I'll just follow on with Tom's comment, which is the program at KGI has mostly been centered on, though, addressing the type of challenges you guys have brought up, right? How do you get better and better at manufacturing to make things cheap enough to open up whole new markets, right? And it has not so much centered on more of the kind of stuff I work on, which is like, well, we don't know if we can do this at all. And, you know, well, that, you know, I've made stuff where we spent almost $1 million making one dose. $1 million a dose. It's insane, but you got it to work. And then you count on the fact you're going to get better and better at it. But is that really where you want to work, or do you want to work in this space? You know, take your pick. You know, but KGI program is more centered on what they're talking about than what I'm talking about. If you go my way, you're going to get laid off.
High reward.
High reward,
High
risk.
High reward.
Yeah, and yeah, hard to say, right? Which way you go.
Great, thank you. That was a teaser for our talk tomorrow. Moving forward, reflecting on your latest projects and experiences, what changes in hiring patterns or skills demands have you observed in the industry that students should be aware of?
Talk about, we had a brief conversation about this this morning. I think talking about some of the additional certifications you can get as you complete your educational journey. One thing that we really look for now is the ability to problem solve. And so if you can do that in a structured way, if you can communicate that in a structured way, that's really great. I think you have an advantage being engineers because a lot of that becomes common sense on how you solve problems. But we, you know, as we interview folks, we're really looking for their ability to solve problems. I think in the last panel we heard, don't just dump a problem in somebody's lap. You know, come with a problem statement, come with the voice of the customer of what that problem really is, and really start to dive in on that. So the better you can define those problems, the better you can solve them. But that's really one of the non-coursework skills we look for in hiring.
Yeah, I would say the job market has changed so much since when I was coming out of school and looking for a job. It's a lot less structured now, and I think it makes it harder, honestly, on all of you to figure out how you're going to navigate this. But I think that you want to realize that companies are looking for employees who can hit the ground running and contribute in certain concrete areas. So you want to, you know, highlight the skills that are important to hiring companies in your search. And because the industries are evolving so quickly, I think it's really important to not lose sight of the fact that our job security is going to be based on what we can do more than working for a certain company. So it's also important to get in the mindset of becoming a lifelong learner. You know, like you want to be building your skills as you get into the job market, figure out, oh, I think I might want to do regulatory work. Well, you know, they don't teach a lot about regulatory work in school, but there's a lot you can learn on the job and through professional certifications about how to go into a regulatory type of role. So that's just one example. I'm not suggesting that's like the best career choice, but so I think that's an important aspect to building your career.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the number one thing that determines how easy it is to find a job is the job market. right? Are you in an area where there's a lot of demand? And if you're not, sorry, you need to switch areas. Even you could be the best in the world at buggy whip manufacturing, and you can't get a job doing it anymore. And so when we founded the program at KGI, it was actually, the original version was business leaders in bioprocessing. And that's because I knew there was a huge market for that, and it had a lot to do with getting better at manufacturing and efficiency and electronic resource planning, all that kind of thing, which Genentech kept on trying to promote me into, and I kept on turning down those promotions because I wasn't interested in doing it myself, but I knew there was a market for it. And so I created the program at KGI to do something that I didn't personally want to do, which is really weird from a faculty member. Everyone, all these other faculty are like, oh, I want you to be just like me. This was like, no, I don't want you to be like me. I understand this is super valuable, right? And so Thomas would be a classic graduate of that era, right? Operations rotation program, learns all this business skill, combines that with bioprocessing, moves up the career ladder that way. Adam's also from my era. He, went more my way, very technical, working for gene therapy companies, right? And a different career path. He was sort of 1 out of 10 of my era, and Thomas was 9 out of 10 of, the career paths from people from my era. When Parvis came here, he switched it to the MMEng program, right, which then moved it very technical, and that did well too, right, but it shifted a bit. So, it does depend on markets, right, and luckily, the bioprocessing market's been great, and one way or another, lots of ways to apply it, making meat, making clean proteins, making healthy fats, making pharmaceuticals, whatever it is, right? It's a great field. That's why, I love it. But you're never quite sure where you're going to end up. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So many of you had to wear different hats in your roles in the companies that you were with. Can you maybe talk about some of the traditional or non-traditional roles of bioprocessing that you had to face and that students should be familiar with?
I'll start there. I mean, I think piggybacking on something Emily said, data management, data skills is a really important area, right? If you love computers, if you like programming on top of your knowledge of bioprocessing, there's the demand for folks who can navigate electronic lab notebooks and data warehouses and make sure that all of the data is moving from the experiment to a database in a way that you can access it and build knowledge. That's a really important emerging role that is, I'd say maybe a little bit non-traditional. So that's one thought.
Beth and I both worked for a guy named Danny Wong at MIT. He's the ultimate tiger dad. He would, I think, be the emperor of China if they still had that dynasty going. And a very demanding guy. He considers me and Beth's husband, who was EVP at Merck, as failures because we didn't do what Newbar did, which is his other student who founded Moderna, runs the biggest venture capital firm in New England, Flagship Ventures. So, he still gives us shit. You guys still worried about making antibodies? He didn't form a company and cure an entire disease. So I always have, everybody has their expectations, and so he's always giving me crap about that. So I finally cracked and invested in various startup ideas where if it works out, I will be the CEO of a therapeutic company, not in bioprocessing, right? So we have small molecules that we think can cure chronic Lyme, other attempts, right? So this would be very non-traditional bioprocessing. You're going to jump in and be the head of a whole therapeutic company on the clinical side, and fundraising and everything. My wife thinks it's totally nuts that I would do it at my age with millions of dollars in the bank. Why are you doing this? But anyway, I guess Danny Wong's still hanging over my head.
Still need to please someone.
Yeah, yeah, whatever. But I have friends that have chronic Lyme disease, so, and there's probably 1 million people in the US now that have chronic Lyme and another 1 million that have chronic COVID. And we think it's a cure for both, so give it a run, right? See what happens.
Yeah, I think for me, most of my career was, or a lot of my career was at the bench, and then as I moved out of the labs and into leadership roles, I think that is one step out, one step further away from bioprocessing. Yes, you're still managing the science, but you're not doing it hands-on. And then I think, the next step I took in my career was moving into an operational role. So now I'm responsible for a site. I don't get to do a lot of the science anymore, unfortunately, although sometimes I will still go in the lab and talk to people because that still brings me a lot of joy. But it's about, running a business. So you learn a lot about the finances, learn about profits and losses, and when maybe you have to lay people off because your business isn't so good, or when you need to hire and ramp, and at what rate you do that, and how to convince your executive team that they need to invest, millions of dollars in your site. So learning that executive presence as well. So still in the bioprocessing industry, yes, but roles that are very far away from the technical side and move more to the business side of that industry.
Can I add one more?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I would say the project management. I would say most scientists and engineers, and I put myself in this category, are horrible project managers. I'm a terrible project manager. But if you're...
I love project management.
And you can see it. If you're organized and you have good communication skills, project management is a really important function in the pharmaceutical industry. Think about developing a drug. It's a team sport. There are multiple swim lanes. There are so many different activities. Somebody's got to put it all together and build a program plan that works with all of these different activities. And in CDMOs and in pharma companies, project management roles are important roles. So if that's an area that you have particular skills, that might be something worth considering.
Great, thank you for giving us a lot of examples outside that we can look into.